Subscribe to Man Told for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. The coffee I'd just made for my wife was still steaming on the table when the sound of police sirens tore through the yard. Less than a minute later, the door burst open. A flashlight beam cut straight into my eyes. 4 hands yanked me into the middle of the living room. Cold steel cuffs locked tight around my wrists. And there she was, the woman I once promised to love for the rest of my life, standing a few steps away, trembling as she said, "He's dangerous, please take him away, before it's too late." I didn't fight back. I just looked at her. In that moment, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel afraid. It was as if every sound in the world had vanished. For 12 years, this house by the lake had been the one place I thought I was safe. But tonight, it turned into a trap, one that locked me in with the very love I trusted. As they dragged me out to the yard, the lake lay ahead, black as ink. Grace's reflection trembled in the glass door. Her hand covered her mouth, as if even she couldn't believe the words she had just said. They say the worst betrayal is the one that comes from the person you love. But that night, I didn't even have the strength to feel hurt. All I felt was emptiness, and only one question kept echoing in my head. Why? Why would the woman I built my life around believe I was dangerous enough to have me taken away in handcuffs? That night, I thought it was the worst day of my life. But I was wrong, because what came after was what truly broke me. My name is Lucas Grant. I'm 42. If you'd asked me what my life was like before that night, I wouldn't even hesitate. Peaceful. Peaceful enough to make a man believe he'd already arrived. That's what I used to think. I left the Army at 30 and moved into corporate cybersecurity. The job wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. Bit by bit, we saved enough to buy a small wooden house by a lake in Northern California. Mornings there were wrapped in fog like smoke. At night, all you heard was the wind sweeping across the water. A place no one came looking for, and nothing to fear except the dark. I thought that house was going to be the last safe place I'd ever need. The woman who walked that whole road with me was Anna. I met Anna back in college. She wasn't the kind of person who made a room light up when she walked in. It was the opposite. When she entered, the noise in the room seemed to quiet down. The day I proposed, all I had was a cheap silver ring and a damp little apartment. She still said yes. She smiled at me, like I was the only thing she needed. In those early years of marriage, we had nothing but each other. I worked nights. She taught piano to kids in town. Some nights we'd sit on the porch eating instant noodles, staring into the dark and dreaming of the day we'd have a little house with a small yard. And eventually, that day came. 3 years ago, we moved into the house by the lake. I can still see Anna standing on that balcony, wind in her hair, smiling so bright I remember thinking, if this is where life stops, I'm okay with that. Maybe that's why I forgot how fragile peace can be, how it can be nothing more than a thin coat of paint. 6 months ago, the cracks started to show. Anna began to change. At first, I thought it was just stress from work. But the more time passed, the clearer it became. Something was slipping out of my reach. She came home later, her phone always face down. Sometimes, I'd wake in the middle of the night and find her sitting in the living room, staring out through the glass, lost in a darkness I couldn't follow her into. I asked, "What's wrong? Is there something you need to tell me?" She shook her head and forced a smile. "No, I'm just tired." But that smile was so faint it chilled me to the bone. One night in April, I went downstairs for a glass of water and found her hunched over her phone, erasing something. The glow from the screen made her face look pale. She jumped, dropped the phone on the wood floor. "It's just a message from one of my students," she said quickly. "Nothing important." Then she scooped it up before I could say a word. I said nothing. I wanted to believe her. But from that night on, I started noticing all the things I had tried so hard not to see. Some evenings, I'd sit in the car outside for a long time, breathing deep, just to walk in with the best mood I could manage, telling myself that at least inside there was still her, still peace. But when I opened the door, all I found was a strange perfume in the air, and a house that felt colder every day. Those signs were no longer fleeting feelings. They were like tiny thorns, digging deeper day after day. One evening, I came home earlier than usual. The house was so quiet, I could hear every step of my shoes on the wooden floor. The curtains in the living room swayed slightly, as if someone had been standing there just seconds ago. I walked in quickly, scanning the room. Empty. Only a faint, unfamiliar scent lingered in the air. I stood there for a long time. Somehow, my own home felt like a stranger's place. A few minutes later, Anna came back. I asked, "Did someone drop by?" She answered right away, eyes turned away. "No. You must have imagined it." That short reply kept me quiet. Not because I believed her, but because I was afraid. Afraid that if I asked again, I'd hear something I wasn't ready to know. From that day on, I started noticing the smallest things. A mug slightly out of place. A bank statement in the trash I'd never seen before. Brief phone calls. And every time the phone rang, she would step out onto the porch, lowering her voice like even the walls shouldn't hear. I've never been a suspicious man. The army taught me to be careful. But with her, I chose to trust. That's why this hurt so much. My trust was wearing thin. Day by day. One night, Anna said softly, "Why don't you take a few days off? Just the two of us. We could get away somewhere. Clear our heads." Her voice was light, but in her eyes, there was something else. Something I couldn't name. Almost like she was looking for an escape route. I looked at her for a long time. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to hold on to something that was already slipping away. But for the first time, there was a fear inside me I couldn't put a name to. In the days that followed, I tried to hold on to what we used to call normal. I made her coffee every morning. I forced myself to tell little stories about the town, just to fill the silence. But the more I tried, the further away she seemed to drift. Some dinners, we'd sit across from each other and avoid looking up. The only sound was knives and forks against plates. Sharp, cold, cutting away at what I thought could never break. On my 42nd birthday, I bought a small cake and lit a single candle. All I wanted was to have dinner with her. But she texted, "I'm busy. I'll be home late." I waited. By the time the clock neared midnight, the candle had melted down to the base. I blew it out in the empty kitchen, left with nothing but the smell of burnt wax and a cold dinner table. Afterward, I went to the garage, pulled out my tools, and thought I'd fix the chair that had been broken for months. I flipped it over, hammer in hand, then just stood there, frozen. Maybe I wasn't trying to fix a chair. Maybe I was trying to patch up a marriage that was already splitting apart from the inside. If someone had asked me at that moment, "Are you scared?" I would have said yes. I was scared because I could already feel something coming. And I didn't know what it was. That house by the lake used to be the safest place I knew. Now every step I take inside, all I can hear is the sound of the water hitting the shore, over and over. Like a warning. A storm is forming. I don't know exactly when I lost Anna. All I know is that by the time I realized it, I was already standing alone by the lake, and she was somewhere else entirely. Some cracks stay silent, until the day they finally split wide open. That day was a gray Saturday afternoon. Dry leaves covered the narrow path to the house. In the trunk of my car was a small bouquet of flowers. Just a simple hope that tonight might feel a little less cold than the days before. But as soon as I pulled up to the driveway, my heart sank. The front door was left ajar. I walked slowly. From inside, voices spilled out. Low, hurried. I froze. A man's voice and Anna's voice. "You have to hurry. I can't take this anymore. Calm down. Don't let him suspect a thing." Just a little longer. Sweat pooled in my palms. The bouquet in my hand crumpled without me even noticing. In that moment, my heart pounded like it did back in the war. But this time, it wasn't bullets I feared. It was the sound of the woman I loved most, secretly plotting something behind my back. I pushed the door open. Silence. The living room was empty, just the faintest sway of the back door. Closing, as if someone had slipped out a second earlier. Anna came out from the kitchen, startled to see me. You're home early," she stammered. I glanced around. No one. "I forgot some files," I said quietly. "Stop by to get them." She tried to keep her voice steady. "The flowers? Who are those for?" "For you." I set them on the table. Her fingers clenched at the hem of her shirt. She couldn't meet my eyes. I didn't ask another word. But in my head, a single thought echoed. If what I heard was real, what's left for me to believe in? That night, I sat in my study. The screen was lit, but the words blurred. The clock ticked loud, like a countdown. Close to midnight, the door opened softly. Anna came in, set a cup of tea on the table. "You should get some rest," she whispered. I didn't look at her. The tea steamed in front of me, but inside, I was frozen. In the days that followed, the invisible wall between us grew thicker. One night, her phone lit up on the table. A message, clear as day. How much longer? She snatched it up, turned away like she'd been caught. Another night, I heard her sitting on the porch steps, her voice trembling through the dark. I'm ready. I've done everything. I'm just waiting for you now. I stood in the shadows, each word carving into my bones. I didn't react. Not yet. I had to be sure I wasn't losing my mind. A week later, coming back from a work trip, I found the safe in my study wide open. Every important document, gone. The lock wasn't broken. It had been opened with the code. A code only Anna and I knew. I knelt there in front of the empty safe. Even the dust around it had been brushed aside, leaving clear marks of someone's hands. It didn't feel like being robbed. It felt like someone close to me had just taken everything, including my trust. I didn't call the police. The years I spent out there taught me this. When you don't know who's behind it, bringing the police in only makes you lose what little trail you have left. That night, I didn't sleep. I changed the safe code, and for the first time in my life, I placed cameras in my own home, not to catch anyone, but to prove to myself that I wasn't imagining things. 3 days later, I opened the footage and froze. Anna sat on the couch. Across from her was a tall man in a white shirt, hair neatly combed. He leaned toward her, his voice low but clear. This is your last chance. Finish it before he gets suspicious. Anna nodded, hands shaking. I've followed the plan, but if I have to face him, I don't know if I can handle it. The man's hand rested on her shoulder, his eyes cold. Just a few more days. Then it's over. I stopped the video there. I couldn't watch anymore. That night, I just sat there. All the years I'd faced outside never brought me to my knees like this moment did. Anna, the woman who once held my hand when I had nothing, was now standing on the other side. The next morning, I came home. She was in the kitchen, making dinner. I stood at the doorway, looking at the familiar figure that suddenly felt like a stranger. I asked quietly, "Is there anything you need to tell me?" She flinched, turned around. Her eyes darted for a moment. Then she shook her head. "No, there's nothing." I nodded. And in that moment, I understood. The woman in front of me was no longer the Anna I once knew. After that video, I never walked into this house the same way again. Every door creak, every phone notification, all of it felt like the ticking of a bomb, one I didn't know when would explode. I chose silence, not because I was afraid, but because I needed to know, what would they do next? The answer came only a few days later. That morning, I opened my banking app. The screen lit up with my account balance, almost empty. For a moment, my heart just stopped. I had to brace both hands against the table to keep from collapsing. Every withdrawal had been made in small amounts, drip by drip over weeks, precise and careful. Whoever did this knew everything about how I handled money. I printed the statements. Each line of red on that paper looked like someone carving my life apart, one cut at a time. And right then, I understood. The documents that disappeared from the safe last week, that was just clearing the way. The real goal was everything we had saved. That night, I forced myself to rewatch the video. This time, all the way to the end. The man stood up, his voice steady. "After the money's transferred, all you have to do is finish the last step." Anna nodded, her face pale as paper. I'll do it." He left through the back door, and Anna stayed behind, burying her face in her hands, sobbing. I sat there watching, chest crushed tight. Being betrayed felt like a knife. But seeing her like that, broken, left me with something worse than anger. A question I couldn't shake. Was this all just deception? Or was there something more? That night, I stepped out onto the porch, and for the first time in months, sat beside her. She flinched, wiped at her eyes. You're not asleep yet?" she whispered. I stared at the black water on the lake. "Is there something you can't tell me?" The silence stretched. Finally, she said softly, "I'm sorry." Then she stood up, leaving me alone with nothing but the wind cutting across the porch. The next day, everything finally exploded. When I pulled up to the gate, 2 strange cars were parked outside. The front door was wide open. Inside, in the living room, 2 bank officers, and the very same man from the video, sat with Anna, papers spread across the table. The air felt thick enough to choke on. He turned, gave me a cold smile. "Mr. Grant, we just need your signature to confirm the account transfer." On the table lay stacks of documents, all the procedures already done. Under my wife's authorization, Anna sat beside them, her hands trembling, crumpling the edges of a piece of paper. She wouldn't look up. I asked quietly, "When did you know about this?" Her voice was barely more than a whisper. "I didn't have a choice." "A choice," I choked out. "You emptied everything we had, and then what?" She said nothing. Her eyes were filled with fear, as if the most dangerous person in the room was me. They left. The house fell silent. We sat across from each other, nothing left to say. And in that moment, I knew we had crossed a line we could never come back from. That night, as I was gathering files in my study, there came a knock at the door, loud, urgent. The pounding shattered the silence of the house. I opened it. 2 police officers stood there. "Lucas Grant, we need you to come with us to cooperate with an investigation." I froze. "For what?" "There's a complaint filed by your wife. Allegations of financial fraud and endangerment." I turned. Anna stood in the corner, pale as a ghost. She looked at me, lips trembling. "I'm sorry. I had to do this." That apology was the final cut. I didn't resist. The cold metal cuffs locked around my wrists right in the middle of the living room. As they led me outside, the night wind cut across my face. Through the car window, I saw her standing there, hands covering her face. Her figure grew smaller and smaller. The car pulled away into the night, and the only thought left in my head was this: I've survived every battle out there, but the one defeat I can't recover from is losing the woman standing right in front of me. And I knew this night was only the beginning. That night, they took me to the police station. Street lights slid across the car window like cold, sharp cuts. I stared outside, everything blurred. All I could hear was my heartbeat, heavy, pounding on a door that felt close to breaking. When the car stopped, they removed the cuffs but kept a tight grip on my arm. The hallway stretched on forever, smelling of metal and damp paper. They led me into a small room. 1 table, 2 chairs, a one-way mirror. The door closed. The silence in that room felt thick enough to choke on. An older officer sat across from me. He opened a file, his voice slow, every word hitting like a hammer. "Lucas Grant, you are accused of using a joint account to drain funds, and of threatening your wife." I looked straight into his eyes. "Neither of those things is true." He frowned. "We have a signed statement. Bank records. What proof do you have?" My hands tightened into fists. This game was set up to leave me with no way out. The questioning went on for hours. They asked about the safe, about the withdrawals, about 12 years of marriage. I answered every question. About the stranger, about the cameras I installed. The officer listened, but his eyes stayed cold, like a blade. "If there's no proof, what you're saying sounds like nothing but denial." I breathed slowly. The cameras in the house recorded everything. They pulled the data from my phone. When the video came on, the room went silent. The man's voice clear. "This is your last chance. Finish it before he gets suspicious." Anna nodded, her hands trembling. The officer leaned forward, eyes locked on the screen. For the first time, his gaze softened. An hour later, he returned. "We'll investigate this man. You are not to leave town until we have results." I nodded. At last, a thin line of light in all this darkness. That night, they kept me at the station. On a cold bench, I lay there staring at the ceiling, each minute dragging by like an hour. One question kept spinning in my head. Why did Anna choose this? The next morning, they let me go. I opened the door to my house and knew she was gone. The living room was stripped bare, her coat gone from the hook. Our wedding photo turned face down on the table. All these little signs, things you never notice when life is normal, now felt like knives. I stood there for a long time, searching for any warmth left behind. Nothing. Just the ticking clock and the smell of cold coffee. I gathered every bill, every bank record, every clip from the cameras. Sitting in the middle of that pile, it hit me. Someone had planned every step. First, the missing papers. Then, the money. And finally, the killing blow. A signed complaint from my own wife. 3 days later, the police called. "We've identified the man in the video. His name is Victor Hale. Once a financial advisor, license revoked for fraud. He disappeared for 4 years. Now he's surfaced again, through this." The officer explained. "He's a manipulator. In past cases, he targeted families with assets. found a weakness, and forced one family member to do what he wanted. I asked, force them? How? Each one had a weak point: debts, secrets, or fear. For the first time, I began to understand. Maybe Anna had been cornered, but understanding doesn't mean forgiving. I lost the money, my name, and her. That night, an anonymous email came through. Just one line. Want to know why Anna betrayed you? Do you want to meet me? And an address. A small cafe on the edge of town. Tomorrow night. I read it again and again. My heart beat faster, torn between fear and hope. It could be a trap, but it could also be the only chance to find the truth. That night, I sat on the porch, cold wind cutting across my face. I knew I was standing at the edge, and sometimes the only way out is to walk straight into the storm. The next afternoon, the sky was a solid gray. I found the cafe tucked away on a narrow street, old brick walls, a wooden sign faded with age. Inside it was quiet. Warm yellow light spilled across the floor, leaving deep shadows in every corner. I chose a table in the back, my back to the wall, eyes fixed on the door. My hands rested on the table, but a cold sweat slid down my spine. Only one thought kept turning in my head. Who was about to walk through that door? At 7 sharp, the door opened. A woman stepped in, tall, thin, wrapped in a dark coat. Her eyes swept the room, then locked onto me. She walked straight over, sat down, and pulled off her scarf. Her face was pale, eyes sunken, hollow from too many sleepless nights. "You're Lucas." Her voice was hoarse. "You sent the email." I asked. "I'm Evelyn, Victor's ex-wife." The air between us seemed to grow heavier. I clenched my fists, but stayed silent, waiting. "I was one of his victims," she said. "I lost everything. Money, my home, my name. You think you're the first." Evelyn pulled a stack of photos from her coat. Victor, standing next to different women. Every single one of those women had the same look in their eyes. Desperation. "He always picks the weakest ones," she said. "Makes them believe only he can save them. And then he turns them into his tools." Her gaze sharpened. "Anna fell into that trap over a year ago." Her words squeezed the air right out of my chest. "What does he have on her?" I asked, my voice raw. "A secret," Evelyn said quietly. "A huge debt she hid from you to protect her family. He promised to fix it, but in exchange, he forced her to follow every step of his plan. And the complaint, that was the final move. He told her if she refused, he would destroy everything. You, her family, and her." My head dropped for a moment. My hands pressed so hard against the table, they turned white. Anger, pain, helplessness. They all twisted together inside me. "Why come to me?" I asked. Evelyn let out a long breath. "Years ago, I sat in this same spot, waiting for someone to believe me, but I stayed silent. And I paid the price. I've been gathering evidence ever since, but I can't do this alone. This time, you're the only one left standing who can take him on." She placed a small USB drive on the table. Her hand trembled. "Emails, recordings, documents, everything he's done. If you still want to save Anna, if you want your name back, give this to the police. This is your only chance." I looked at that tiny USB. It felt as heavy as a stone in my hand. "And remember, Lucas?" Her eyes locked onto mine. "He won't stop. If you want to end this, you have to be stronger than him." She stood, wrapped her scarf around her neck, and walked out. Her figure disappeared behind a thin curtain of rain. The cafe fell silent again. I stayed there for a while. The coffee in front of me had gone cold. Then I got up and walked out. I didn't go home. I went straight to the police station. Placing the USB on the table, I looked straight into the eyes of the senior officer. "This is what you need to bring him into the light." He took it, his eyes narrowing. "If what's in here is true, Victor Hale won't be able to run this time." That night, I returned to an empty house. I sat at my desk, pulled out a blank sheet of paper, and wrote just one sentence: "I will not give up." I pinned it to the wall, right in front of me. From now on, I will fight. Not just to take back what I lost, but to pull Anna out of the nightmare Victor built around her. I looked up. In the window, my reflection stared back at me. No longer the man who had been knocked down, but a man ready to fight back. A week after I handed the USB to the police, my phone rang late in the afternoon. The officer's voice was low. "Lucas, the data has been verified. He won't get away." I gripped the phone. When will you take him in? We're wrapping up the last pieces of evidence. But listen carefully. Victor knows you were the one who gave it to us. If he comes to you, don't face him alone." I hung up. His warning echoed in my head. But this time, I knew. Running wasn't an option anymore. That night, the house was drowned in darkness, lit only by the warm circle of a desk lamp spilling over the stack of papers in front of me. Outside, spring rain tapped steadily against the window, as if counting down to something. I sat there and waited. If he came, I wouldn't call the police. This was a fight I needed to finish myself. At 10 o'clock, an engine rumbled at the gate. Headlights swept across the window, bright, then gone. 3 knocks on the door, slow, heavy, like hammers hitting my chest. I took a deep breath and opened it. Victor stood there, black coat, collar turned up, rain dripping from his hair, but his smile was dry, cold. "Finally," he said, his tone flat. I was curious, wanted to see what a man looks like after he gets back up from a fall. I stepped aside. "Come in. Let's talk." The living room was lit by a single, dim yellow light. Victor sat down, peeled off his gloves slowly, like he owned the place. "You know, Lucas," he started, "I never planned to make you an enemy, but you chose to sit at this table." He leaned forward, voice steady. "Evelyn gave you the USB, didn't she? You think the police will save you? No. All you did was make this explode sooner." I looked straight at him. "What did you do to her?" He shrugged. "She was weak. I just chose the easiest person to control. And you're the same." Victor pulled a phone from his coat and placed it on the table. On the screen, Anna, sitting in a dark room, eyes wide with fear. "She's not locked up," Victor said. "But she knows going back to you means losing everything. With me, at least she can breathe." Looking at that screen was like being stabbed in the chest. I wanted to shout, but instead, a cold calm took over me. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice low. Victor leaned back in the chair, a thin smile curling on his lips. "Simple. You walk away, stop pushing the evidence. Stay quiet. I'll return some of your money. And I'll leave her alone." I raised my head, and if I don't. He leaned in, close enough to feel his breath, his voice dropping. "I have one more card to play. When I lay it down, you won't just fall. She'll never stand up again." I held his gaze, my words slow, deliberate. "No, not this time. I'm not stepping back." The smile faded from Victor's face. He stood, leaned down until his eyes were level with mine. His breath was cold. "Good," he whispered. "Then you just chose the hardest road." His footsteps echoed through the hall as he left. The door closed behind him, and I stood there alone, with a storm waiting just beyond the walls. 3 weeks later, the hearing took place at the local courthouse. The courtroom was small. Harsh white light spilled over everything, stripping away any place for secrets to hide. Across the aisle, Victor sat upright in a tailored suit. His eyes slid toward me, full of arrogance. Beside him, Anna sat with her head bowed. Her face was pale and drawn, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. When the hearing reached the argument phase, Victor asked to represent himself. The judge allowed it. He stepped into the center of the room, his voice calm. "Before you decide, there's something the court needs to see." A screen lit up, showing a series of documents. A massive loan taken out years ago, signed under Anna's name. Victor turned, a thin smile on his lips. "This is where it all began. Without me, her family would have been ruined. And this husband, this man, never even knew what she was hiding from him." A wave of murmurs swept across the room. I stood frozen. This was the final card he had warned me about. Victor's voice cut through the noise. "Lucas, are you sure you want to drag all of this into the light? Do that, and everyone will know you've been living a lie for years. Or will you stay silent, and at least leave her a shred of dignity? I looked at Anna. She trembled, tears slipping silently down her face. In that moment, every memory, every betrayal, every ounce of love, all of it mixed together, pressing on me like stone. I closed my eyes once, felt my heart pounding like a drum. Then I stepped forward, stood in the center of the room, and spoke. Yes, I didn't know about the loan. And yes, I was betrayed. But that doesn't erase the truth. Victor built this trap. He manipulated and destroyed lives. I am ready to lose everything, if it means he pays the price. Die. I turned to face him, each word heavy as a hammer. Anna lifted her head, looking at me. In her eyes there was pain, but also something that looked like release. I turned away, this time not because I was running, but because the choice was clear. The prosecutor moved forward with the evidence from the USB, emails Victor had sent, recordings of his threats, and financial records proving he had created the very debt that forced Anna into his control. The room fell silent. Each piece of evidence was a hammer blow, shattering the polished shell of power Victor had worn for years. The judge struck the gavel. Based on the evidence and testimony, this court rules to escalate the case to a higher court. The defendant, Victor Hale, is to be taken into custody immediately. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed in the room. Before he was let out, Victor turned, his eyes flashing with a cold gleam. "This isn't over, Lucas." The courtroom slowly emptied. Anna walked toward me, her voice shaking. "I'm sorry. I never wanted this. I was just too scared." I looked at her. There was no anger left, only a dry, exhausted sadness. "I know, but some cracks. They never close." Outside, the sky finally broke open after weeks of rain. Late sunlight spilled across the wet courthouse steps. I stood there for a long moment, eyes closed, drawing a deep breath. For the first time in months, I felt the weight in my chest ease. Then I stepped forward. Each step felt like walking out of the shadows, toward a chance to begin again. The trial ended, but the aftershocks lingered for weeks. My name, and Anna's, were everywhere in the local papers. On the streets, I still felt the stares. Half pity, half curiosity. Strangely, none of it had the power to knock me down anymore. The first day I came back to the house by the lake, I stood on the porch for a long time. Spring wind drifted through, carrying the damp scent of grass. Inside, everything was exactly as it had been the night Victor walked out. But it felt different now. No fear, only emptiness, and a silence I could finally accept. I took down the note I had taped to the wall. "I will not give up." Folded it, placed it in a drawer. It had done its job. The old job was gone. My name in the industry, ruined. I started taking whatever work I could find in town. Fixing fences, gardening, lifting crates at the hardware store. At first, people looked at me with hesitation. But slowly, as they saw I just kept working, quiet, without complaint, their looks softened. One old man, while I was mending his fence, patted my shoulder and said, "Some losses are there to make you live honestly. One day, you'll understand." One afternoon, while I was standing in line at the grocery store, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. Anna, she stood a few steps away, her face even thinner than it had been in court. We just looked at each other. My chest tightened, like something twisting slow and deep. Painful, but familiar. When I walked out, she hurried after me. "Lucas, wait." We sat on the bench outside. The evening wind carried loose receipts across the street. She spoke first, her voice trembling. "I'm leaving town. For me, everything here is over." I nodded. "Where will you go?" "I don't know yet. I just know I have to start over." She hesitated, staring down at her hands. "I know nothing I say can undo what happened. But thank you. Thank you for not hiding the truth. At least because of that, I finally got free of him." I looked out toward the lake in the distance. The surface rippled in the pale light of sunset. "I'll start over too," I said quietly. "But here, I'll rebuild from what's left." There was a long pause. Then she stood. "Good luck, Lucas." I watched her walk away. Her figure grew smaller and smaller in the fading sun. I didn't call out. A long chapter had closed. That night, I opened a blank notebook. For the first time in months, I started to write. Not complaints, not evidence, just clumsy lines. What I had been through, what I still hoped to do, and things I had never been able to say out loud. A few weeks later, one late evening, as I bent down to lock my door, I found an envelope tucked beneath the mat. No sender's name. Inside, a single sheet of paper, scrawled in uneven handwriting. "You won, Lucas. But remember, this game never had just one player." V. I stood there in silence. Cold wind slipped through the cracks of the porch, making the paper tremble in my hand. Even with Victor behind bars, he still had enough reach for this letter to find its way to me. I stared at the words for a long time. Then I set it right in the center of the table, where I would see it every day, not as a warning, but as a reminder. I'm done running. Victor's letter stayed on the table. I didn't hide it. Every day, walking past it, I looked at it and realized it had lost all of its weight. From that moment on, I stopped being afraid. I began to learn how to live again. Time passed. Life became simple. Mornings, running around the lake. Afternoons, fixing things for the town. Evenings spent reading, writing a few lines just for myself. The house that once felt like a box of shadows slowly changed. I repaired it with my own hands. Threw the windows wide open so sunlight could flood in. Every time I cleaned, it felt like I was wiping away a thin layer of dust that had settled on my own heart. One early morning, with mist still lying low on the water, I walked out to the wooden dock, the same place Anna and I used to sit years ago. Now, there was only the soft ripple of waves and the sound of birds greeting the day. I sat down, closed my eyes. In that darkness, images came rushing back. The laughter we once had, the long nights of arguments, the cold walls of a holding cell, Victor's eyes, and that unfinished goodbye on the day she left. Amid it all, a single question rose, clear and sharp. To move forward, do I have to forgive? I drew a deep breath, and slowly an answer came. No, forgiveness isn't the condition for moving on. Acceptance is, and giving yourself permission to start over. I opened my eyes. Ahead of me, the sun had just broken the horizon, spreading gold across the lake. From my pocket, I pulled out a copy of Victor's letter, looked at it one last time, then tore it apart, slowly, into small pieces. The scraps hit the water, spreading out like pale ink, fading. Word by word, stroke by stroke, they disappeared, like the last shadows leaving me. This time, I smiled. Not because I had won, but because he no longer had any power over me. A few days later, I came back to the house, threw open the windows, let wind and sunlight rush in. I swept away the dust, painted every wall. Each stroke of the brush felt like cutting through the invisible ropes that had bound me for so long. By the time I stopped, my shirt stuck to my back with sweat, but the space around me had changed. It was no longer a place that held me. It was a beginning. That night, I sat on the porch. The breeze was cool, and the faint scent of fresh wood still lingered in the air. Across the lake, yellow lights shimmered. Crickets sang in the grass. I looked up at the night sky, and for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting anymore. Not waiting for Anna to return. Not waiting for Victor to fall further. Not waiting for someone else to recognize me. The only person left to face is me. I drew in a long breath. The road ahead may be long. It may be lonely. But tonight, for the first time, my heart is truly quiet. There are no more shadows behind me, only an open road in front of me, and I've already begun to walk. One morning, I woke earlier than usual. A thin layer of mist covered the lake, white as smoke. I made myself a cup of coffee, carried it out to the porch, and sat down on the old wooden chair. One small sip. The bitterness touched my tongue, but this time it was gentle. For the first time in a long while, even bitterness felt peaceful. Sitting there, I stared at the still surface of the water and thought back to a year ago. A man who thought marriage was everything, and in just a few weeks watched it all collapse, like a house built on sand. Back then, I fought against everything, until I realized what I needed to face wasn't the world. It was the despair inside myself. There was a time when mornings haunted me. Sunlight only meant another long day to endure. But today, for the first time, I welcomed the sunrise like an old friend. I don't know what the rest of my life will look like. No job, no marriage, my reputation gone. And strangely, I'm no longer afraid. Losing everything forced me to see myself more clearly. With nothing left to hide behind, there's only the bare truth of who I am and what I really need. I thought of Anna. There's no anger left, only a hope that somewhere she finds her own peace. And Victor, he's still behind bars, but I know darkness out there never truly disappears. The difference now is that it no longer has any power over me. I didn't win everything, but at least I won myself. I stood and walked to the edge of the porch. The sun was climbing, pouring gold over the surface of the lake. It made my eyes squint, but this time I didn't turn away. I used to hide in the dark. Now I stand and face the light. And if I could send a message to another man, still lost in his own night, I'd tell him this. You don't have to win everything to stand again. Just start small. Cook yourself a meal. Run a mile. or sit with a cup of coffee in the morning. One day, you'll realize you don't need anyone to save you anymore because you've already saved yourself. Some wounds will always leave a mark. Some losses will never be restored. But once you learn to walk with them, you are no longer the same person. And that is its own kind of victory. I turned back inside. Morning sunlight spilled through the window, laying itself across the freshly cleaned wooden floor. I closed the door behind me. Outside, the wind still moved. But in this house, for the first time in a long time, there was only peace. One chapter had closed. Ahead of me was a long road, and this time, I'll walk it at my own pace.